everyone, it's so good to be back again this week, and I'm delighted to let you know that since I've seen you last, we got a lot of rain here in this area. In fact, there are some parts of the garden that are really muddy, which is something I don't really see that often. Now, before I go showing you around the garden, I wanted to say a big hello to Lily May from Melbourne. I know you're watching this now with your mum, and I have heard that you are a wonderful helper in the garden. So great job, Lily May. And especially for you this week, I'm starting off with something that you might find interesting. I'm going to show you what I feed the worms in the worm farm. I have some kitchen scraps here that I want to feed to the worms in the worm farm. There's some banana peel, pieces of apple and a tomato. Having a worm farm and compost bins is a great way to recycle kitchen scraps. They help to convert organic matter like this into fertilizer for your garden. Okay, so here's my worm farm here. I got this a few weeks ago now. I was given it for free. It's a little bit damaged. The tap on the base here was chewed by their pet dog. Later on, I'm going to put this back up on a stand and place a bucket underneath the tap so I can collect the worm juice. I've just removed the lid, and as usual, I've got a slug and a snail. I'll remove both of them. So usually with worm farms you can get fruit fly larvae in here too if it's too wet, but I haven't had that issue yet. But I do get quite a lot of these, which I need to check regularly because I'd rather the worms eat the food than the slugs and snails, because they sure are eating everything else in my garden. And here we go, here's the worms. So these are different to earthworms. Where earthworms tend to improve the condition of the soil, these little guys here are a specific type of worm that breaks down organic matter, and then they end up producing this black stuff, which is called black gold in gardeners' terms. It's actually worm poo pretty much, and you use this in the garden. That's not quite it there, it's a bit mixed up with some of the food. But I will collect some in a few weeks' time, and you use that in the garden, and it's so rich in nutrients for your plants. I feed these worms once a week at the moment, and I'll increase the amount of food that I give them once the population grows. And all I pretty much do is I just sprinkle the food over the top, and they will do the rest. They'll seek this out and break it down and eat it. Now the other thing I need to check once a week is the moisture level here, because if it's too dry, what will happen is the worms could dehydrate and die, and if it's too wet they could drown. And to give this its proper definition, this is called vermicompost. So it's when the worms turn the waste into worm poo, and we use this, as I said before, in the garden as a nutrient rich product to feed our plants. I'm going to leave these little worms alone now so they can enjoy their meal. And you might notice here that I have some cardboard covering the top. So as well as having the lid that goes over the entire thing, I put down a layer of cardboard, which really helps keep the area nice and dark. As well as that, it retains the moisture. And you know what? Eventually the worms themselves will actually eat through this. Cardboard is a really great source of fibre for them. So let me tuck them in, and we'll come and check on them again maybe in a few weeks. As I was kneeling down here showing you the worm farm, I got the most beautiful waft of wattle flowers, and check this out, the buds are starting to open. So with this tree, it usually does open towards the end of winter time, and it's absolutely covered in these small little clusters of yellow flowers. So about 2 years ago, I think it is now, I planted these two trees here that you see that are almost to full size in this area as little tube stocks. I planted them just there beside this other wattle tree or acacia, and with these trees they tend to not really last more than 7 years, so it's really good to plan ahead, because although this one here still has a bit of life in it with plenty of buds, there are quite a few branches now that are starting to die off, like this one here, and I did trim it back quite a lot last year too. So, you know, I want to keep it as long as I possibly can here, but there will be a time when I'll have to cut that one back. But not to worry, because this area will still have some beautiful wattle trees, just slightly over a bit. I started weeding this garden bed during the week. Here is where I planted onions, both red and brown. I'm pleased with how much green growth is happening here on top, and that tends to happen with onions. They put a lot of the growth on above ground to start off with the green shoots, and then once spring arrives, I'll start to notice that the bulbs down here will fill out nicely. Well, hopefully that's the plan. Similar to garlic, onions have quite a long growing period. They can take up to 8 months from sowing the seeds to harvest. Above the onions I have the magnolia tree, and you know what, driving around my area, a lot of the magnolia trees now have flower buds opening, and there is not one on this, which makes me really sad. I just hope it's not dead, but it's not looking good at all. I'll keep you updated on this one. And just to explain to those of you who are new to the channel, during the summertime here we had a really shockingly hot day, actually a few days, but one in particular was pretty bad, and after that day all the foliage on this tree turned brown, and I was pretty nervous that it wouldn't survive. It got hit pretty hard. This tree is probably at least 50 years old, and it looks like it's come to the end of its life now. I'm now down at the very back of the property in the fan garden, because guess what? We actually have peas. I ate my very first golden podded pea this week. I picked one off here to take a closer look. They're still on the smaller side, but I would say in about a week or two I'll be harvesting at least a handful of these. I made the most of all the rain that we received this week and popped in a load of plants around the garden. This is one of the areas here outside of the raised garden bed section where I did a bit of planting. The first thing I did was I cut back this big drift here of lemon balm right down to the ground, and I also pulled out some annual flowering plants which had passed their best. It was really nice to see all of these fresh shoots once I cut everything back, and actually it's kind of helping me out now a bit because it's more clear where the drift of this plant is. And I noticed that there's some over here which I don't particularly want to grow there. It's a bit too close to the garden edge, so I'm going to dig this clump up and transfer it elsewhere in the garden. I'll quickly go through what I planted in here. So over beside that old watering can are a few foxgloves. There's a lacy phacelia, a few cuttings that I just put straight in the ground of geraniums, and then back here this is a perennial paper daisy, and with some of those nigellas that I have popping up everywhere, I put in a row of them along here. There's a couple more of the primulas, and there's also one of these snapdragons which I had sitting in a pot for ages, so I'm pretty happy that got put in the ground. The next job that I want to do here is I want to move some of that mushroom compost that I have just to top up around all these plants, and then maybe finish it off with a bit of bark or sugarcane mulch. Check out what's going on over here on the trellis. There is only one poor lonely little pea plant growing up it, and I'm happy to see there's a flower. I'll make the most of small achievements, because the other plants that were down here are well gone now. I'm going to try yet again and sow another round in here, and maybe try some different strategies from stopping the snails and slugs from eating them. Let's just hope it doesn't get too late in the season that I'll run out of time trying to constantly put peas in here, and it'll end up being time to put in my beans. I have some more seeds sown here in this little greenhouse. Not as much as I would have liked to have done, but I have started on the tomatoes. There's about 5 varieties there. Some African marigolds. Over here is that's another tomato. A nigella. This is called Transformer. I haven't actually tried that one before. It's got really unusual looking flowers. So I'm hoping now I have success with growing them. And down here I also have some more just little seedlings, some more billy buttons, sea holly that I had sown in autumn time. I transferred some of those seedlings into these 2 containers. They're going to make a beautiful cut flower, and they're really drought tolerant too. So I'm excited to try them out this year. And what's this one here? Oh, paper daisies. Yes, oh, paper daisies. I have to get going on sowing more of them. Absolutely love them. This upcycled fire pit is really starting to fill out now. Check out all of these beautiful pink flowers, whites. I'm getting a few more here on the Johnny Jump violas. I ended up putting one of those nigella seedlings in there, and I saw my very first bloom on this snapdragon. Oh, it looks like it's way down a little bit, but look at them. Aren't they just so beautiful? I also put some more plants in here. I finally managed to get those foxgloves put in to the section at the back near where the chickens are. There's about 6 or 7 plants in there. I hope they do well. I've never tried to grow foxgloves in this section before, so we'll see. And everything else is filling out quite nicely. With some of these plants, they are annual flowering plants, like these here, these pansy type flowers, which are a type of chrysanthemum. So what I've done in between all of these plants is I put in some perennial ones, like this one here, which is also a daisy type flower. I'll put the name up on the screen. So this will have enough space to get started and filling out and growing, and then hopefully by the time these have passed their best, these ones will cover enough area so that it doesn't look as sparse as it did last year when I transitioned from spring to summer. I was rewarded with a lovely surprise in this area as I was weeding it this week. Look what I found underneath some foliage. It's a whole group of poppy flowers. These ones must have self-seeded from what I grew last year. I'm just really hoping that they're the purple ones. I filled this basket up with some colourful annuals this week. It might look familiar to you because this is where I sowed some poppy seeds, but you know what, none of them germinated. So what I decided to do instead was to put in some of these lovely cheery flowers. To be honest with you, I really didn't give those poppy seeds enough attention that I had sprinkled on top of here. So for poppy seeds to germinate, they really need to be on moist soil. And I wasn't coming out here every day. I forgot sometimes to come out and missed it, and you know, it's my bad, but not to worry anyway. I've just replaced it with all of these. Let's go through them now. Starting off with these Bellis perennis in white and pink. A pansy plant where the flowers are not particularly looking good. What I'll probably do with these is I'll just cut them all off, and there's plenty of new little buds appearing at the base. I also have some Alyssium, Dianthus and Dusty Miller. I think this is Dusty Miller. Do you know what? I have let all the spacing rules go out the window because these are so crammed in here into this container. But I have a little plan. I just want to see how they go. And yes, they will be competing for the nutrients in the potting mix below. But I was thinking maybe what I'll do is a little experiment. I will give the flowers in this basket a liquid feed every week and see if that will be enough to supplement the nutrients which they will miss out on due to the high competition in this basket. I noticed this week that something has been at my Russian red kale plants which are growing in here. This is a very familiar sight. Do you remember around this time last year in this area as well, I think it was, or nearby at least, I was growing some broccoli plants and they got snapped off like this as well, and I eventually found out that the culprit was some birds. I think it was the cockatoos. I'm not sure, it could be the same thing that's happening here. And look, there's more over here as well. I'll have to investigate and figure out who's been at these. I'm going to finish off today by showing you this camellia tree out the front, which is starting to flower again. Absolutely covered in buds that are just waiting to burst open, like this beautiful one down here. Thanks so much for watching, everyone, and I'll see you again next Friday.